For 20 years, I sacrificed every holiday to build a life for my family. But this Labor Day, instead of gratitude, my own brother sent me a bill for $100,000. He claimed I owed him for his share of the family business. He thought he could humiliate me. But what he didn't know was that I was about to turn his holiday into his nightmare. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. The envelope was thick, embossed with the name of a law firm in downtown Louisville. It had arrived that Saturday morning, the very start of Labor Day weekend, when most people were putting up flags and firing up grills. I sat at my kitchen table in silence, the morning light slanting to the blinds, while cicadas screamed outside in the humid Kentucky air. The name on the front was my younger brother's, Ethan Graves. My gut twisted. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the last argument over family business. Graves and Sons Manufacturing, a factory my father and I had bled for. Ethan had swooped in years later, all slick suits and NBA talk, claiming he could modernize everything. Instead, he stripped assets, padded his accounts, and pushed me into the background. I broke the seal carefully, half hoping it was a peace offering. Instead, a cold stack of papers slid onto the wood. Legalese, invoices, and at the top, outstanding balance, $100,000. My eyes skimmed the lines. Reimbursement for capital improvements at the Lexington plant, $60,000. Executive relocation stipend for Ethan Graves, $20,000. Travel and lodging for strategic meetings, $10,000. Miscellaneous management consulting fees, $10,000. And then the note, scrawled in his familiar arrogant hand. Marcus, you've coasted too long on our father's name. Time to pay your share. I'll be collecting by September 1st. Labor Day, consider it poetic. If you can't come up with the funds, don't bother showing your face at the family barbecue. Ethan, I sat there, staring, the cicadas buzzing louder as if mocking me. For 20 years, I had carried that company on my back, working double shifts on the line, missing birthdays, even sleeping in the damn break room when a machine broke down at 2 a.m. I'd given everything. And Ethan? He'd walked in after grad school, with his polished shoes and empty jargon, and turned my sweat into his dividends. Now he wanted to hand him $100,000 on Labor Day of all days, like some twisted tribute. At first, rage shot through me, hot and blinding. My hand shook so badly the letter crumpled in my grip. I rose, pacing the small kitchen, the walls pressing in with memories of late nights and callous hands. Above the fridge, my father's old pocket knife sat in its worn leather sheath, a relic from when work had meant honor. I pulled it down, ran my thumb along the dulled steel, and felt something shift inside me. The rage cooled, hardening into resolve. If Ethan wanted a payment, I'd give him one, just not the kind he expected. That afternoon, while neighbors set up flags and kids rode bikes with streamers, I sat in my study with a notebook and an old laptop. The plan began to take shape. Step 1, information. Ethan's weakness was his ego, and egos leave trails. He loved to flaunt his wealth, his trips, his supposed brilliance. I opened his LinkedIn, his Instagram, even the local business journals. There was a puff piece from Kentucky Business Monthly. Ethan smiling in front of the Ashwood Country Club, shaking hands with city officials. The caption, local entrepreneur revitalizes Graves and Sons Manufacturing with strategic investments. I snorted. Strategic, my ass. Those investments were the very things he billed me for. Digging deeper, I found vendor listings, companies he claimed we'd contracted. A supposed $20,000 consulting firm with no real website, just a Gmail contact. Another supplier registered at a P.O. box across town. Fake. All of it. Ethan wasn't just arrogant. He was sloppy. Each discovery was a jolt of energy. The anger that had once paralyzed me now propelled me forward. I started drafting a ledger of my own, not debts I owed, but evidence he owed me. By evening, the kitchen table was covered in printouts, notes, and highlighted contracts. Beside them sat a family photo, me, Ethan, and Dad at the old plant in 2004. My father's arm was slung around both of us, his eyes proud. He died 2 years later, never knowing the divide that would rot between his sons. I touched the frame, whispering under my breath, "Don't worry, Dad. This Labor Day, I'll make things right." The phone buzzed on the table. A text from Ethan. Reminder, $100,000 due Monday. Don't embarrass yourself. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed, then picked up my pen. A slow smile spread across my face as the plan crystallized. If Ethan thought he could reduce me to a bill, he was about to learn the true cost of betrayal. I woke early on Sunday, the day before Labor Day, with a strange calm settling over me. The cicadas were quieter, the air heavy with the promise of rain, and my notebook sat on the table like an ally waiting for instructions. Ethan thought he had me cornered. He'd picked Labor Day as some twisted symbolism, time to pay up, as though I hadn't already paid in blood and sweat for decades. But he had no idea I'd been up half the night tracing his paper trail, connecting dots, and finding cracks. The key wasn't money. It was leverage. And tomorrow, when the family gathered for our traditional barbecue at Uncle Robert's farm, Ethan would have no stage left to stand on. I started by calling an old friend, Derek Cole, a man I'd worked with for 15 years on the line at Graves and Sons, before Ethan pushed him out with efficiency cuts. Derek knew the truth about those so-called investments. He'd seen Ethan pocket funds meant for equipment upgrades and redirect vendor payments into shell companies. "Marcus," Derek said, his voice gravelly from years of factory dust. "I knew this day was coming. Ethan's been playing fast and loose with numbers for too long. You want me to talk?" "Not yet," I replied. "Just be ready. Tomorrow, when I give you the signal, I want you to back me up. Bring those old invoices you kept." He chuckled darkly. Already dug him out. This Labor Day might actually mean something. By mid-afternoon, I drove into Lexington and parked a block away from Ashwood Country Club, Ethan's pride and joy. He'd moved his office there, abandoning the factory floor entirely. I walked the perimeter slowly, blending in with golfers and retirees, until I spotted what I needed: the back entrance for vendors and staff. A delivery truck idled by the service door, the driver leaning against the bumper, scrolling his phone. "You here for Ethan's party tomorrow?" I asked casually. The guy shrugged. "If by party you mean that big barbecue, yeah. He's got us hauling in rental tents and a sound system. Big Shot wants fireworks, too." I raised an eyebrow. "Fireworks? For a family cookout?" The driver smirked. "Man, drop a deposit. Said the rest would come Labor Day morning. $6,000 total. $6,000 for fireworks. And he expected me to pay him $100,000. I thanked the driver, slipped him $20 for a quick peek at the invoice, and walked away with confirmation. Ethan was overextending himself, banking on my check to cover his extravagance. That night, I spread everything on my dining room table: Derek's copies of vendor invoices, Ethan's bogus bill for $100,000, and now the fireworks receipt. I highlighted every inconsistency. If Ethan wanted a performance at tomorrow's barbecue, I'd give him one he'd never forget. But I needed one more ally. I opened my phone, scrolled through contacts, and paused a familiar name: Rachel Alvarez, an investigative journalist I'd met years ago when she covered factory layoffs. She'd always suspected Ethan of shady dealings, but never had proof. Until now, when she answered, her voice was wary. "Marcus? Been a long time. I've got a story for you, Rachel, about misuse of company funds, fake vendors, and a man who thinks he can charge his own brother $100,000 for existing. Interested?" Silence, then, "Send me what you have. If it checks out, I'll be at that barbecue tomorrow, with a camera." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Perfect. Ethan craved an audience. Tomorrow he'd get one, just not the kind he wanted. The sun rose hot and unrelenting on September 1st. By 10 a.m., the smell of charcoal and ribs wafted from Uncle Robert's farm, and cars lined the gravel drive. The annual barbecue was a Graves tradition dating back 50 years. Normally, it was a day of beer, laughter, and stories. This year, it would be something else entirely. I parked under a maple tree, the leather folder of evidence tucked under my arm. Around me, cousins played cornhole, uncles tended the grill, and Ethan, always a showman, held court in a tailored polo, gesturing broadly as he bragged about future expansions. His fiancée, Tessa, stood nearby, her diamond ring catching the sunlight like a flare. Marcus, Ethan boomed, his voice dripping with false warmth. Didn't think you'd show. Thought you might be too embarrassed. I forced a smile. Wouldn't miss Labor Day. Dad always said this was the real family holiday. He smirked, clapping me on the shoulder. Good, because we'll be talking about your contribution after lunch. His words hung in the humid air, smug and poisonous. I simply nodded, my hand tightening on the folder. After ribs were served and beers cracked open, Ethan rose by the grill, tapping a spoon against his glass. The chatter hushed. Family, he began, his voice rich and confident. Labor Day is about honoring hard work, and I've worked damn hard to keep our legacy thriving. But no man succeeds alone. My brother Marcus here, he gestured toward me with a wide smile, owes me a little debt of gratitude, and tomorrow he'll be showing that gratitude with a check for $100,000. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My aunts looked at me in shock, cousins whispered. Ethan basked in the attention, his grin shark-like. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the deck. The folder felt heavy but righteous in my hands. Funny you say that, Ethan, I said, my voice steady, because I brought something too. I laid the invoices on the picnic table. Derek's originals, the fireworks receipt, the bogus consulting contracts. This isn't about gratitude, I continued. It's about fraud. Fake vendors, shell companies, padding your pockets while pretending to modernize Dad's business. And now you're trying to shake me down to cover your lies. Murmurs surged. Ethan's face flushed, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. You're lying, he spat. Those are confidential. From the back of the crowd, Rachel Alvarez stepped forward, camera in hand. Her press badge glinted in the sun. Then you won't mind if I publish them, will you? She said coolly. The crowd erupted. Aunts scolded, cousins demanded answers, uncles muttered curses. Ethan's smirk collapsed into fury. Marcus, he hissed, his voice low, you'll regret this. But it was too late. His empire of arrogance was unraveling, and Labor Day had only just begun. The barbecue dissolved into chaos after my reveal. Voices rose in overlapping waves. Accusations, defenses, whispered gossip sharp as blades. Ethan's face flushed crimson, and for the first time in years, I saw him without the mask of polished control. He wasn't a business visionary anymore. He was just a cornered man. Rachel Alvarez moved through the crowd like a hawk, snapping photos of the documents I had laid out, recording audio clips of relatives reacting in disbelief. My Uncle Robert, normally the peacekeeper, shook his head slowly. Ethan, I trusted you with Dad's company, he muttered, voice trembling. And you pulled this? Ethan tried to recover, his smile forced. This is a misunderstanding. Marcus is twisting things. He's always been bitter. But the murmurs wouldn't stop. Too many family members remembered his arrogance, the unexplained firings, the new cars bought while others struggled. Derek, standing near the back, lifted a hand. I've got copies too, he called out, pulling a battered folder from under his arm. Invoices Ethan signed off on himself. Payments to vendors that don't exist. I kept them because I knew someday the truth would matter. The crowd's mood shifted from confusion to certainty. Eyes turned on Ethan, cold and judgmental. He clenched his fists, jaw working furiously. You think this ends here? He spat, his voice sharp as a snapped wire. Marcus, you've just declared war. I left the barbecue before the shouting reached its peak. Rachel promised to call that evening. Derek stayed to answer questions, and I walked to my truck with the folder under my arm. The September sun was low and orange, painting the fields in fire, but my chest felt like stone. I'd won a battle, yes, but not the war. Ethan wasn't the type to fold after one public humiliation. No, he'd double down. That $100,000 bill was just the start of his greed. As I drove home, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls from Ethan, text filled with venom. You'll regret this. I'll take everything you have. Labor Day will be your last holiday in this house. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles pale. He wanted me afraid. Instead, each word steeled my resolve. That night, just as rain began to patter on the roof, Rachel called. Marcus, she said, her voice urgent. I dug into those shell companies you flagged. Guess what? 2 are registered to a condo in Ethan's name. He's been funneling money through them for years. We're talking hundreds of thousands, maybe more. I exhaled slowly. Enough to trigger an investigation? Oh, definitely, she said. But you should be careful. Guys like Ethan don't go down quiet. If he senses you've got more evidence, he might try to get ahead of it. I thanked her, hung up, and poured myself a glass of bourbon. The rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers, and I stared at my father's old pocket knife on the mantel. Ethan thought money was power, but he'd forgotten what Dad always said. A man's reputation is worth more than his paycheck. And Ethan's reputation was about to catch fire. Labor Day evening, the sky over Lexington cracked with thunder. Families all over the city gathered for barbecues, fireworks, and laughter. But in my neighborhood, the night was different. Around 8 p.m., I heard it. The boom of fireworks in the distance. Ethan had gone through with his ridiculous plan, even after being exposed. I stepped onto my porch, watching red sparks burst against a cloudy sky. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Derek. Marcus, you want to see this? Ethan's putting on the show anyway, trying to save face. But half the vendors never showed. Guests are bailing. I smirked, the bourbon warming my chest. Ethan thought fireworks could drown out the truth, but spectacle doesn't erase shame. Another message came in, this time from Rachel. I'll have the article live tomorrow. Front page. Ethan's empire is finished. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, the sound of distant fireworks echoing like drums of war. But then, headlights swept across my driveway. A black SUV pulled up, its tires crunching the gravel. My chest tightened. Ethan stepped out, rain streaking his polo shirt, his face twisted in fury. He stormed up my porch steps without knocking, his voice raw. You think you can humiliate me? In front of family? In front of reporters? I stood my ground. You did that to yourself, Ethan. I just pulled the mask off. He shoved the crumpled $100,000 bill into my chest. You're going to pay this, Marcus. One way or another. You owe me. I pushed it back into his hands, calm but firm. No, Ethan. You owe me and Dad. For every hour we worked while you played the prince. For every lie you told to make yourself look bigger. And now the world's about to see who you really are. His eyes burned, his voice dropping to a hiss. You think you're clever, but I've got friends in the city. Investors, lawyers. You won't win. I leaned in, my voice steady as steel. You already lost. Tomorrow, everyone reads Rachel's article. Your vendors are bailing. Your reputation is ash. The only question is how far you fall. The thunder cracked overhead, rattling the porch beams. For a moment, neither of us moved, just 2 brothers locked in a silent war, the rain pouring down like judgment. Finally, Ethan sneered, jabbing a finger at me. This isn't over. You just lit the fuse. He turned, stomping back to his SUV, and sped off into the storm. I watched his taillights vanish, my pulse hammering, my mind racing. I knew he wasn't bluffing. Ethan wouldn't go down without trying to drag me with him. And Labor Day wasn't over yet. Labor Day morning came heavy with humidity, the kind that made the air stick to your skin. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours. Ethan's threats replaying in my mind like a stuck record. His SUV tires tearing off into the storm last night were more than a tantrum. He was planning something. At 7:30 a.m., the phone rang. Not a call this time, but a block number, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even pick up. Marcus Graves? A smooth voice said when I answered. This is Attorney Daniel Price, representing Ethan Graves. You've illegally distributed confidential company documents and defamed my client. Expect a lawsuit. Damages sought, $500,000. $500,000. The words hit like a sledgehammer. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. Tell your client I'll see him in court. But when I hung up, my hand trembled. Ethan was moving fast. By mid-morning, Rachel called, her voice urgent. Marcus, the article is live, but Ethan's already firing back. His lawyers issued a statement claiming the documents were stolen and doctored. They're painting you as a bitter ex-partner trying to sabotage him. I cursed under my breath. Can they make that stick? Now that we have corroboration, Rachel said. Derek's testimony helps, but we need more. Bank records, direct proof that Ethan registered those shell companies himself. Otherwise, it becomes his word against yours. My father's pocket knife lay on the table, its blade dulled but unyielding. I picked it up, rolling it between my fingers as I thought. Then we get the proof. That afternoon, I met Derek at a diner off Main Street. He slid into the booth, the smell of bacon grease clinging to his work jacket. You look like hell, Marcus, he muttered. Ethan's lawyers are coming after me for $500,000. I said flatly, we need something solid. Derek rubbed his beard, thinking, you remember Elaine, the secretary who worked accounts before Ethan pushed her out? She kept records. Real meticulous. If anyone's got proof, it's her. He scribbled an address on a napkin. She lives out by Versailles now. Tell her I sent you. I folded the napkin carefully, hope flickering in my chest. The drive to Versailles took 40 minutes, winding through rolling hills and horse farms glistening in the midday sun. Elaine's house was modest, paint peeling on the porch, but she opened the door with wary eyes that softened when I mentioned Derek's name. Inside, she poured sweet tea into mason jars, her hands shaking slightly. Ethan ruined me, she said bitterly. Said I was old-fashioned, that my filing system was outdated. Fired me on the spot, but I didn't throw away everything. From a back closet, she pulled out a dusty box and set it on the table. Inside were ledgers, receipts, even photocopies of checks signed by Ethan himself. Checks made out to those shell companies. I flipped through them, my pulse racing. This is it. This is a smoking gun. Elaine leaned forward, her eyes sharp. You burn him with that. For all of us, he stepped on. I promised her I would. By the time I returned home, Rachel was already on her way over. Together we spread Elaine's records across my kitchen table, the evidence forming a damning trail. Rachel's eyes gleamed. This isn't just mismanagement, she whispered. This is fraud. He could face criminal charges. But before we could celebrate, headlights swept across the driveway. Another black SUV. My heart lurched. This time it wasn't Ethan, it was two men in suits. They knocked hard, flashing badges. Private investigators hired by Ethan's legal team. Mr. Graves, one said coolly, we're here to recover stolen company property. Hand over the documents. Rachel stiffened beside me, phone in hand. These are public interest records now. You've got no right. The taller one smirked. Then a judge will decide. Until then, consider this your warning. Ethan plays for keeps. They left as abruptly as they came, gravel crunching under their tires. My stomach twisted, but Rachel only smirked. They're scared. That means we've got them cornered. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the records locked in my father's old metal toolbox. The rain had returned, steady and relentless, tapping against the windows like a countdown. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Ethan. Enjoy your little victory, Marcus. Tomorrow I light the fuse. By the time the fireworks end, you'll be ashes. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. He wasn't bluffing. Labor Day had always been about family, about honoring hard work. But tomorrow, it would be something darker, a showdown neither of us could walk away from unchanged. I looked at the pocket knife on the mantel, its blade catching the dim light. Dad's voice echoed in my memory. Stand tall, son. Never let a liar write your story. So I poured myself another bourbon, sat down at the table with Rachel and Derek's folders, and began drafting my final strike. Labor Day was nearly over, but the real fireworks hadn't even begun. Labor Day evening came heavy with storm clouds, the sky bruised purple and gray. The whole city buzzed with celebrations, fireworks set to explode across Kentucky skies. But for me, the real fireworks were about to go off in Ethan's world. I had the evidence, Elaine's ledgers, Derek's invoices, Rachel's recordings. It was enough to not just humiliate Ethan, but to bury him legally and financially. Still, his final text echoed in my mind like a warning. By the time the fireworks end, you'll be ashes. I knew Ethan well enough to believe he had one last move. Rachel called just after 6 p.m. Marcus. The article's gone viral. Ethan's name is trending. People are calling him the Labor Day fraud. But I've also heard chatter. His lawyers are scrambling to freeze assets, and he's been making calls to politicians. I grunted. Of course he is. Ethan never fights fair. She paused and added, be careful tonight. When powerful men realize the walls are closing in, they lash out. I locked the toolbox with Elaine's files inside, slipped it on the floorboard of my study, and pocketed Dad's old knife. Not because I planned to use it, but because it reminded me of who I was fighting for. At 8:45, just as the first fireworks cracked in the distance, I heard the low growl of an engine outside. I peered through the curtain. Ethan's SUV, headlights glaring like the eyes of a predator. He climbed out, not in a suit this time, but in a soaked t-shirt, his hair plastered against his forehead. He looked less like the arrogant businessman, and more like a man cornered by his own lies. He didn't knock. He pounded the door with his fist until it rattled. Marcus, open up. You think you've won? You haven't won anything. I let him in, my pulse steady, my recorder app already running on the table. He stormed into the living room, water dripping onto the hardwood. His eyes darted to the locked toolbox by the mantel. Those files, he hissed. You hand them over, or I swear, I'll ruin you. I'll make sure you lose the house, your pension, everything. You'll die broke, just like you lived. I stood firm. You ruined yourself, Ethan. The vendors are gone. The article's out. Rachel's probably filming this right now. His head snapped toward the corner, eyes scanning for a camera. There wasn't one, but the seed of paranoia was planted. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Dad gave us everything, Ethan. His name is legacy, and you turned it into a scam. That $100,000 bill you sent me, that was your mistake. You thought I'd pay it. Instead, it paid you back in full. He froze, trembling with fury. For a moment, I thought he might lunge. But instead, he pulled out his phone, waving it like a weapon. Last chance, Marcus. You transfer me the money right now, or tomorrow morning I'll have the police drag you out for theft. I smiled grimly. Go ahead. But when they search this house, they'll find your checks, your signatures, your fake vendors. Theft? No, Ethan. It's called fraud. And it's got your name all over it. He screamed then, raw, guttural, the sound of a man watching his empire crumble. He smashed his phone against the wall, shards scattering across the floor. His chest heaved, his eyes wild. You don't get it, he roared. I built something. I was supposed to be bigger than Dad, bigger than you. And you ruined it because you were jealous. I shook my head slowly. No, Ethan, you ruined it because you forgot what Labor Day means. It's about honest work, sacrifice, dignity. You wouldn't know those words if they carved themselves into your skin. The fireworks outside erupted into a grand finale, red and gold bursts filling the sky, rattling the windows. Ethan stood there, silhouetted by their glow, looking small for the first time in his life. Finally, he slumped, shoulders sagging. His voice cracked. It was supposed to be perfect. I opened the door, the cool night air rushing in. Get out, Ethan. Your show's over. He stumbled into the rain, no fight left in him, his figure swallowed by the storm. By Tuesday morning, headlines blared. Local businessman exposed in Labor Day fraud scandal. Ethan Graves faces criminal investigation for embezzlement. Rachel's story hit national wires. Derek's testimony made the rounds, and Elaine's ledgers sealed the case. By week's end, Ethan's accounts were frozen, his so-called investors fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Me? I sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee, the autumn wind cool against my face. Neighbors waved. Some clapped me on the back. Derek stopped by, grinning. Hell of a Labor Day, Marcus. You finally got your justice. I nodded, sipping slowly. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, like the steady tick of Dad's old pocket knife on the table beside me. Ethan had tried to turn Labor Day into my humiliation. Instead, it became his reckoning. And for the first time in years, I felt free. If you enjoyed this revenge tale, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment telling us your thoughts. What would you have done if your own brother demanded $100,000 on Labor Day?